Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy. This is episode 359. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Stacy. That is at StacyPound89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this day after Boxing Day?
Victory Wednesday. Merry Christmas. Merry Knicksmas. Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Can't complain. Enjoying the this is like the unofficial week holiday after between Christmas and New Year's. So enjoying watching sports and doing really very little else. We're going to talk about sports, specifically the Knicks. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. First being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strickland on Instagram, posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you haven't done so already, please hit like and then subscribe to the channel. That would be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise. You can find that on our website, www.thestrict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. We got all kinds of cool stuff on there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. And finally, the Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There is a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland's newest podcast, Takes from Obvious Bozos, that is hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you also get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks team more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. And now you get access to Strictly NFL, our newest podcast that is hosted by Constantine Metricos and Jeff Rasmussen, a podcast about, you guessed it, the NFL. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. That's going to a variety of additional benefits, like listen to our recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-host a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. All the major sports are in action this week, with the college football playoffs ready to kick off. BetOnline is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. Head to the website today to get into the action and see all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So the Knicks won on Christmas. They beat the Bucks 129-122. I believe they had lost something like 11 or 12 straight to them coming into the game. They lost the game, obviously, 2 days prior on Saturday, which was also a matinee game that started at 12:30. A game that really they were never close in. What do you think changed, or do you just think they played better?
Well, to the extent that defensive execution is playing better, I think that was the biggest difference. So I'll start there. Obviously, Milwaukee still took 41 threes. They didn't shoot 1,000,000%. They definitely missed some open shots. But you could see from the jump, because I remember Benji had done a thread on just the lack of effort really from a lot of the Knicks, and the Bucks wear you down, right? So I don't want to say they were lazy, but you go up against a team like that, I'm sure to some extent, even subconsciously, maybe they feel like, just this next closeout, who cares? Someone else is going to get an open three and they're going to hit it. They never miss. You could see from the jump, the Knicks were closing out with purpose. There's one play that I really thought summarized this. They're usually against stretch fives. One thing is they're like, we just have to live with that. We need our rim protectors there, right? So Brook Lopez, Vooch, when they play the Bulls, they usually will get open threes. And Brook had a couple, but there was one play where Brook got the ball and it looked like it wasn't a pick and pop. It was, but Hartenstein had been shading into the paint. Brook gets the ball above the arc, kind of at where the straight line meets the curve, and it looked like another three. And he's cashing those, right? That he's a very good shooter. And Hartenstein closed out, not just out of control, but he was chopping his feet at 7'1", and he not only forced Brook, who's really big dude, he's pretty contest agnostic. He forced him to bring it down, but he couldn't even drive. And Brook is reasonably quick for his size too. And I thought that was just one play, but it exemplified the attention to detail, the focus, and the discipline the Knicks had on that end. And it was to a man. Obviously there are guys who are going to live up to that more than others, right? Quickley, Hart, DiVincenzo, I thought with some, he made some mistakes on defense, but they were really executing. But even you could see from Randall, you could see RJ had a really good, especially in the second half defensive game. To a man, they all brought it. Having said that, the Bucks still scored 122 points. And I think the other part of it was, again, the Knicks made a concerted effort to push the ball more. They're playing with a lot of pace. I do want to talk about that because I almost think of it a little bit like the Grinch's heart growing 3 times on Christmas. Because Tibbs, I think Brunson has really wanted to push the ball going back to last season. And I think they're starting to do it more. And I think, especially because he trusts his point guard, Tibbs is leaning more into that. But I think the third part is they had 3 other guys. I mean, Brunson was Brunson. We've said everything there is to say. That guy can be your top offensive option on any kind of contending team. I don't think there's a debate there.
Maybe you're a misogynist.
Yeah. Sorry, Kenny. I didn't mean to. It wasn't because or Stephen A. But they got 3 other guys. That was the supporting cast showed up. They got Quickley in limited minutes, got 20 points. RJ had a really good first half on offense. And Randall was what we have come to expect from Randall. And to be fair, he's been solid against the Bucks, but they just have gotten no help for Brunson. Yesterday they had it. So I think those are the 3 keys. Just perfect execution on defense for the most part. Pushing with pace, which had some mixed results because when they missed, it usually led to an open 3 for the Bucks. So but the biggest thing, was also the supporting cast. I think if they can do that consistently, that's the real question. Can the supporting cast show up consistently in the playoffs? That's what the difference, the biggest one is, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still not sure about the pace. I will say this: how many games has Mitch has missed? The last 8 games, I believe. Right, they're 5-3 since he's been gone. The Knicks over their last 9 games rank 10th in pace. If I go to, so I'll just do that. Last 8 games, the Knicks are.
Do you get that from PvP?
No, I get that from NBA.com. The Knicks are 10th in they're 10th in pace over their last 8 games at 100.81. For the season, they're just over 98. So I'd venture to guess that there's something closer to like 97 over the previous prior to the past 8 games. So definitely a big uptick, or not a pretty big uptick. And I don't know exactly what to make of all that. I do think some of this is not just about look, Mitch being out is a big deal. I think they play faster without him. They also have opportunities to play faster without him because Hartenstein is way more capable of advancing play with passes after defensive rebounds. And he's also just.
Do you think Tibbs leans more into it with Mitch out because he knows that they have fewer options? They kind of have to do that because Mitch is out.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I'm not even sure that's true because I feel like the half court offense actually looks better without Mitch. But I just think that Hartenstein naturally is more willing to push pace, and he's also more capable of it. Mitch is not somebody you want or is necessarily capable of getting up and down the floor, and I think they deliberately slow down the pace with him. I mean, watching the game and then watching it back, like, I think the biggest thing that stands out is just how they were pretty locked in to start the game. Overall, I thought, yes, you had your, random Randall, brain dead moments, and then RJ had his stuff. I actually thought RJ's defense in this game, I was like pretty unimpressed by it. And generally speaking, like, I don't know what he's like. What is he? 6'6", whatever the fuck he is. 6'6", 230. I get Middleton's a bigger guy, but like, it just feels like he doesn't put up any resistance on him, and Middleton's just able to walk him down wherever he wants to go and get exactly where he wants, and then put up a shot that is completely in his comfort zone. I just think that's like it's not good enough, and I think that it's okay to expect more of RJ, given the fact that he's big, and the fact that Middleton's not somebody who's going to like blow by you, especially not anymore. Like, I think RJ needs to do a better job, and I think he can do a better job. So, I think that's worth being said. But overall, yeah, like the team was great, and defensively, I thought they were as good as you can hope to be. Versus Milwaukee until the final, like, whatever it was, 4 or 5 minutes when, look, again, I don't really want to sit here and criticize anybody after what was an awesome win, but I don't know what the fuck Randall and RJ were doing in the last 4 minutes. And I actually don't have any idea why the fuck RJ came back in the game. He came back in with like 3:30 left for no fucking reason after Quick had been, Quick was awesome in that entire game, and especially.
Can I posit one thing there? Quick was awesome. I think so. Quick came in with about 6 minutes left in the third quarter.
If you're going to do the minutes thing, I don't want to hear it. That's not why.
No, well, I did. It seemed to me a little bit like Quickly was getting a little fatigued. I think he should have closed. But there was one play late in that. I don't think this is why I got pulled. I don't think it justifies it because I don't think other players are always headless standard. There was a play where he was helping inside and they kicked it out to Portis in the corner. And wide open three for Bobby Portis, and Quickly did the Randall thing where he just watched. That's something you've never seen from Quickly. So I do think, and it's not so much that it's a minutes thing. It's, to me, this is more of a sign that he needs to start because he does end up playing these 15 minutes in a row stretches. And I think, should he maybe have gotten a quick breather and then bring him in to close? Maybe. I don't know. But I think it is still, he needs to start the way Tibbs does his subs. That's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, he could have been
a little tired.
He could have been fucking sucking oxygen, like needing an oxygen tank at half court in that game. I wouldn't have cared. He should have closed that game. And RJ came in and did. I mean, he was like, I genuinely like. I don't even know what the hell him and Randall were doing to close that game.
That charge was fucking awful.
That charge was pathetic.
Everyone put that on Hart. Like, I think Hart wanted to slow it down. He realized he had a 3-and-1, but it was not a bad pass at all. RJ took 2 steps, and
RJ can also just pull the ball out if he wants to. Like, he doesn't have to go there. And he has a dump off pass to Hartenstein. Like, this is not, if he can't adjust to that, says more about him than Josh Hart. Like, I don't know.
I don't think Hart made a bad play. Really.
I think Hart was fine. I have no problem with what Josh Hart did on that play. I have a much bigger problem with what RJ did on that play. And I have a bigger problem with it because he compounded it. But, I mean, it didn't matter because he made one of the free throws and that made it a 7-point game. So game is over. But on basically the next possession he had the same exact opportunity. And instead of Middleton this time taking a charge, it was Portis in that position, and Portis fouled him instead. But if Portis just stands there like Middleton does, it's another charge. And it's just, you can't have it. He had another possession. I guess I'm just going to turn this to like, we had to criticize RJ today, pod. But like, he also had a possession in the third, I don't remember. I think it was the third quarter. It had to have been the third quarter, where it was a kind of a semi-transition play where DiVincenzo cuts to he basically gets the ball in the catch, drives baseline, and then he swings it to RJ. DiVincenzo relocates to the corner right next to RJ. Yeah. He's wide open. And it's like a no-brainer pass. And I think even Hubie Brown might have said on the broadcast that RJ should have passed it back to him. And RJ instead, like, he drives. I don't even remember the end result of the play at this point. I think he might have gotten a foul or whatever it was. But it was just like, those are the plays that I'm just like, I just don't get it. Like, I just don't understand.
And even the pass that precipitated that, he threw this like bullet to DiVincenzo, where his like right idea is cutting in his lane, but there wasn't much of one, and DiVincenzo struggled to really save it, right? RJ in that situation probably could have kept it. I don't know if he was frustrated that DiVincenzo didn't take the layup or what, but after he got it back, to your point, that was another easy read. Like, now he's like, this is kind of how offenses work, right? If the first one doesn't work, it's not like, oh, okay, now it's my turn. No, like, the guy got himself a shot. It was just some baffling decision making. I do want to highlight a lot of the good that he did. He came out shooting the ball well. I don't love that he just seems to think he can challenge Brook Lopez, but he had a couple of nice successful takes mixed in with some really tough ones that Lopez is a great rim protector. But you have to know your personnel. But I thought that overall, like, they got a good game from him. But to your point, yeah, down the stretch, it was tough to have him in there over Quickley.
I mean, yeah, he played a fine game because he scored really well in that game. What did he have? I don't even remember. He had like what 22 on 20 on 13 or something like that. Like he scored well, and therefore he had a good game. But like even in that game, he manages to be a minus. Like he's the biggest minus on the team somehow. And it's just like it has nothing to do with shot making. Like I mean, yes, it has something to do with shot making, but it's like all of this stuff is within his grasp. But at some point, like if he doesn't do it, then he's just not going to do it. He's passing on like 26% of his drives now, which is, I mean, that's an awful rate. He's still finishing poorly on drives. His 3-point shooting, yes, it was nice to see him make a few in this game, especially early on. Like I think that definitely helped him and it helped the Knicks. I think it kind of, it's easy to be like, well, just keep letting him shoot, but when you make a couple early shots, it changes how teams defend you. And so like I think that helped him and the team out a lot. But the decision making is just not where it needs to be consistently. And like it is his 5th year. I don't think it's crazy to hold him to a higher standard anymore. And like the standard isn't just, oh, well, his defense has been better and he's making some floaters now and the free throw percentage has gone up, so therefore good. Like I think it needs to be higher. And it needs to be higher consistently because after that tear that he went on to start the year, right, from 3, like
he's down back to 34.7%.
Yeah, he's down back to 34.7%. His true shooting is now at a career high of 54.2, which is mostly down to free throw shooting. And then, which is not insignificant, but I mean to say, like, this idea that he's growing leaps and bounds anywhere else is just not, I don't see it. Like his EFG, 48.3, and that just grades you on like, basically what you're shooting from the field adjusted for 3-point percentage and volume. It's 48.3. That's lower than it was last year. That's lower than it was his second year in the league. Like his career is 47.7 EFG. So he's just eking above that. And
for all the improvements on the floater, he's back down to 34.5% from 3 to 10 feet, 31.4 from 10 to 16, right? So it's still not an efficient part of his game. Like, let me ask you this: like, even if the decision making improved, this is kind of where I'm at. Do you think even if the decision making improves, if he's just a 35% 3-point shooter, is that enough from that position? Given that he's playing with Brunson and Randall at this point.
I genuinely, if it was like a steady 34-35%, that might be enough. Depending on who the other guy on the perimeter is. Like if it's Dante who's shooting whatever the Valley's shooting, like 40-something percent. Yeah, maybe that's enough. But like with, just with, it's just how streaky he is, where it's like every time you think like, oh my God, he's made a shooting leap, then it's just like, oh, actually he hasn't. And he's going to suck for the next month and a half from 3. And it's brutal. Like it just sucks to watch. And you feel like an asshole because you don't want to be rooting against him or like come across like that. But then at the same time, I'm like, okay, can we just get him out of the game? Like if he's just going to like not be able to make a shot and his defense is not particularly, I don't even want to say it's been fine this year. It's been solid this year. Yeah, it's not like moving the needle. It's not like he's Derek White or something, the greatest player of all time. But like, it's not like he's changing anything really too much out there. And he's just doing his job. You know what I mean? Like, and I think if that's what you're getting from him, then like, it's hard, honestly, for me to like, I'm telling you, man, it must be, Immanuel Quickley might be the greatest teammate of all time because the fact that he's not said anything publicly, at least as far as we know, about his minutes, about anything is crazy. Again, I think he's basically
team high plus 14, by the way, again.
Yeah, they basically lost his minutes or the minutes without him by 7. And they won by fucking whatever it was, 14 when he was on the floor. But like, it's just like he's he's having to sacrifice minutes because RJ Barrett is guaranteed to start on this team. And that made sense to me in RJ's first year, second year, third year, even to an extent last year. But at this point, it's his fifth year. If he's not better than this, and then you have, and not just that he's not better than this, but when you have so much data saying that, yes, Immanuel Quickley and Josh Hart, for that matter, are awesome when they play next to your two best players, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. And when you play those four together, you basically are blitzing teams off the floor. Like, I don't know. Like, at some point, you have to make it a priority to play those guys together, not to like sneak in 3 minutes here and 4 minutes there for them. Like, it makes no sense to not play them more. And maybe that comes from starting, or maybe that comes from giving somebody a quick hook. You know, like, I don't really give a shit what the fuck it is. Yeah. I don't care what it is though. Like, it has to happen because the point, like, we're trying to win, right? That's the point, right? We're trying to win basketball
games. To win the game.
If you're not, if your argument to not maximize that has to be that you think ultimately playing RJ these minutes with these guys, with whatever, like how he's going to develop, is going to unlock this like higher level for him and therefore the team. And I just don't know what the evidence of that is. And like, I think it's pretty obvious visibly that those three guys, like, yes, they can make it work because they're all pretty talented offensively. Like, as much as like, there is value in RJ's just ability to get to the rim at volume. So like, that's not insignificant, but like, it doesn't flow that great. And you can tell at times it gets bogged down. And I think it's so obvious that when you watch those two play with IQ and play with Hart, that group just works. It doesn't matter. And like, yeah, you can tell
IQ and Hart. Having IQ and having Hart are kind of the keys to basketball, right?
Correct. But like, I know that Josh Hart isn't shooting the three that well. I know that Julius Randle has not shot the three well this year at all. Whatever. We don't have a spacing five. I get all of like the surface level reasons for skepticism. Oh, Quickley and Brunson are small. Like, it's going to be, I don't care. Like, you can give me the logic at the end of the day. Like, that has not borne out. It didn't bear out against the fucking Bucks in this game. Like, that group was great together again. Like, it's not a surprise. It is consistently happening. It has consistently happened since they acquired Josh Hart last year. And I am happy that Josh Hart gets the benefit of the doubt and gets to play 28, 30, whatever fucking many minutes he gets to play every night. That's fine. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is players lesser than Immanuel Quickley on this team, both RJ Barrett and Dante DiVincenzo, getting more minutes than him at this point. And not just getting more minutes than him, but playing them in lineups that you know would be better with Quickley in their stead. So like, and forgetting, even if you want to say, well, we need to, like, we're still invested in RJ. We think there's something more coming. Like, okay, guess who else? Guess what works? Play fucking Quickley instead of Dante. This is not.
Well, Quickley did have more minutes than Dante by the end, but it was by two. And I mean, I don't want to rip Dante. I thought he really worked hard.
Yeah, I have no problem with Dante. I thought he battled pretty hard, and I thought that, I know Lillard scored a bunch of points, but like, I think he made it as hard as he could on him. I thought he did a really good job on him the game before too, when really it felt like
he was one foul on the closeout, but you saw, I think the one that really, there was a stretch that really frustrated people where he actually like shook his defender, and then he ends up in at 18 feet, and then he froze because he doesn't have any options there, right? He's a limited player from that standpoint, and the ball went off, like somebody knocked it off his head out of bounds, right? And there are a couple of those. So I think that on RJ, I think with this, if they're looking to upgrade, I do think RJ has value, right? He can get to the rim at will. You can still see that event in time, like the decision making, it seems like something he can get to the level where he can really leverage that rim pressure. So he has value, but I just think if you have Brunson doing what he's doing, you have a guy like Randle who has learned, I think, to play under a reasonable amount of control, and can give you that controlled aggression. I think he's continued to evolve. you really want a shooter there. You'd ideally want a shooter who can also create a little bit off the bounce. And that's what Quickley gives you. I mean, look, he had 20 points. Everyone says 20 points in 23 minutes. And it's like, why only 23 minutes, right? Was his defense bad? No, his defense was actually, I thought, excellent. He had one where he gave Campaign a little bit too much space. That was really his own defensive bit. And this is what people miss, right? They're like, well, the on-off is skewed. It's been 4 years. Every time he's on the floor with whoever he's playing with, played with Alec Burks. He played with Derrick Rose. He played as the lone man on the bench unit. He's played with those Sims and Hartenstein lineups that had awful spacing. They win it every time. So from a team standpoint, the guy clearly elevates you. Even if you don't completely buy the on-off, it's worth seeing what happens in more minutes when he has started. And there's people who say, well, he can't, he's not a great enough point guard to create without a screen. When he started in Brunson's stead, not only was the offense successful, he was averaging 20 points, 6 assists, 5 assists, pretty effective in that role too, in larger minutes. So, I think the Quickley thing, we all know he needs to play more minutes. To me personally, it's less an RJ thing. RJ still only had 27 minutes. To me, it's really the fact that DiVincenzo starts. I think that DiVincenzo and Grimes should probably be at about 16 minutes a game. Hart played 31 minutes. I thought he was awesome. I don't really have a big issue with that, but he'd take a couple of minutes from Hart, a couple of minutes from DiVincenzo. That gives you quickly up to 27, 28. I think for when all is said and done, I don't have a problem with RJ getting 27 minutes like he did against the Bucks. Again, I do think Quickley was tired at the end, and I think that if I don't, I think that they're, but I still think that's a little bit on Tibbs because again, you got to start the guy if you're going to have these kind of sub patterns. And I think that is the biggest candidate for internal improvement is to give Quickley even 5 or 6 more minutes per game. And give that lineup with Hart 5 or 6 more minutes per game. That is really something that can really elevate the Knicks without making a trade. I do want to also highlight the fact that this was not a game where the Knicks were particularly hot from 3. They shot 31% from 3, 8 for 26. Brunson had 38 somehow, and he only took three pointers, which is I didn't even think about that at the time. That's pretty insane. But we do need to talk about Brunson, obviously. I want to first shout out Isaiah Hartenstein. According to Stephen A. Smith, Isaiah Hartenstein. We had to deal with, that clip was just bafflingly bad. He said, we don't have Mitchell Robinson. We don't have Jericho Sims. You can tell he doesn't watch the Knicks, right? He probably just looked, oh, Jericho Sims is starting. He must be the second string. And Hartenstein has just been a monster.
He was great again on Christmas.
He's been great. I thought he played pretty well on Saturday too. I think he's generally been good against the Bucks. 11 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. I like the only thing that worries me is like, can he sustain this level of effort consistently for 30 plus a night at that size? But so far he's been doing it. Tell me a little bit about, obviously Brunson was the best player on the floor. But I think it's worth shouting him out, and I don't know why he's probably not getting the credit. I'm actually getting a little worried about the Knicks being able to retain him this summer.
Retain Hartenstein? I think if he doesn't get credit, it's more likely you'd retain him, right? Because people will be like, "Oh, it's just a gimmick."
I think eventually he will. Is the point, but
yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. I think he'll end up staying if they want to keep him. Maybe if they're like, well, I'm just gonna make a full recovery. We like this guy just as much as we liked Hartenstein a couple of years ago. We'll just keep him. I don't know. I just think he's been awesome. And he seems like a great teammate. Everybody in the team seems to like him. I liked his 1A post after Christmas Day on Instagram. That was a funny post. I don't really
talk about Brunson. Maybe he was talking about himself.
Yeah, right. I don't really know what there is to say about him. I just think that it's not insignificant to me that the offense just flows really well right now with him when he's with the starters. Even with, we talked about like some of the clunkiness with RJ and whatever, but like it makes a difference when he's on the floor, even with that stuff. And it's probably precisely because of that stuff that he makes a difference, because he's a more skilled player than Mitchell Robinson, and he has more in his bag that he's capable of doing. You can see they can run way more dribble handoff at the top of the key. It's not just pick and roll and hope that Mitch can then dive as fast as he can to the rim and get offensive rebounding position. They're able to get through a lot more actions. They can play faster, obviously, as we've talked about. Like, I just think all that stuff adds up. And while he's nowhere near, I mean, he's not the defensive player Mitchell Robinson is, but I do think he's more active in terms of like how far up the floor he can show out on screens. I think he's more capable of executing diverse coverages. He's not the defensive rebounder Mitch is, although he's pretty good and definitely gotten better during his time in New York. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say, mostly because I just think it's like very transparent what he provides. I don't, it's not like a hidden thing. It's not like, like it's not like a Quickley thing where you're like, oh, people don't realize like how good he is at stunting, and then recovering back to his man. Like what he provides is so transparent that it's honestly ridiculous to me to listen to like how Stephen A. Smith was talking about it, because I'm like, okay, so you just don't care that he's a great rim protector, that he has improved substantially as a defensive rebounder, that he's a good passer for a big man.
He watches him.
Yeah, I mean,
all he knows is, his name's Hartenstein. I haven't seen this guy.
Which is its own, which is its own stupid thing. But it's like, I don't know. I just, to me, like I not even trying to dismiss the conversation. I just don't like really know what to say, because I just think it's been kind of obvious to me since last year to provide it, and it's why like earlier this year, when I felt like he was trying to do like too much and just wasn't executing defensively the way we know he's capable of, that it was getting a little frustrating. Especially that Utah game he had was like really weird, where I don't know what the hell was going on with him there. But, since Mitch has gone down, especially since he kind of like basically got put in as a starter against the Lakers because Sims was out after the first 3 minutes. I mean, I think you can argue he's been the Knicks' best player. He's been that good. Obviously you'd probably say Brunson, but like he's really been in that conversation. He's been excellent. And I think the team suddenly like finding its footing and looking competent, and maybe it's not the same level of defense we saw obviously from the start of the year, but they've definitely kind of tightened back down. That's not all down to him, but he deserves a lot of credit for it. And I think it gives guys like DiVincenzo and RJ and Brunson and whatever a little more leeway and a little bit more kind of security of understanding what's there behind them. Whereas with Sims, you could just see like it was a shit show every possession, where you're like, these guys had no idea what to expect. They didn't have any trust in his ability to, hey, if I'm going to force this guy, if I go over the screen and I force him to drive, do I really trust him to like get a stop for us? And I think that stuff added up and really led to like, I mean, more or less a disintegration of the defensive integrity of the team. But this is I mean, he's been essential to kind of this little, I mean, I guess you can call it a mini turnaround after a mini slump. So yeah, I mean, he's been fantastic.
And it's worth noting, I don't know where Stephen A. got the 26th in defensive rating stat from. You mentioned that in that clip.
That was like their 26th since like it was like since Mitch had gone out, and it's like actually predates Mitch going out, because if you remember, they got absolutely destroyed by Milwaukee and Boston. Yeah, defensively. So those were also kind of there.
But even so, they're 14th on the season. If I go from December, I don't know the first date where Mitch was out. If you go to December 1st, that's their last 11 games. They're 16th in that time, right? And that again, so they're lower in that time, but that does include 3 games against the Bucks. It includes a game against the Celtics. Includes playing, playing the Lakers and the Suns. The Suns are in a bit of turmoil, but they still have offensive firepower. So I think that the defense is capable of a lot better than they've shown. They're a little bit shorthanded now. I think they'll probably make a move to kind of fix that at the deadline. I'm pretty, I'm more bullish on the defense than I was, when Mitch first went out. I think the bigger issues really, I think, somebody said this on Twitter that the issue is not really Hartenstein replacing Mitch. The issue is really you have Taj Gibson and Jericho Sims. I'll talk about Taj in a second because he absolutely deserves a shout out. There are, and I think that's another area. Again, you have a guy that's proven to be very impactful on defensive end in Immanuel Quickley. You got to play him more minutes. That's one way to really improve that. The other way, obviously, I think at the power forward position, I think Randall was like he's really their only option on Giannis. I thought, by the way, I thought they had an awesome game plan against Giannis. They were able to help, but I think with Giannis, a lot of it you see in these games in the playoffs. It's an easy thing to say, build a wall and don't let him get in there, but he's so quick and so strong, and he can delay his moves. You really have to send your help and time it in such a way that he has to adjust and take poor angles on those finishes. When he does that, he can still make them because he's Giannis, but the timing on the help was really important. Because and when he got the ball at the top of key, Randall was saying, "Shoot, man, I don't care." I thought Randall played that well. But even when Giannis was getting his drives, there would be a late guy coming, not too late where Giannis already has the advantage, but also not too early where Giannis can do another move, right, or create contact. The timing was great, and Hartenstein was excellent at that. I want to shout out another guy, Taj Gibson. Everybody laughed when we signed Taj Gibson. Oh, here we go again. The thing is, it's a funny Tibbs thing. He's been very reliable over the last couple of years for the Knicks. And he came in today, or came in on Christmas, and I thought Taj did much. Like, I think Benji posted this, right? Like, the Knicks had no right asking Taj to do what he did, but he did it. He only got called for one foul. He probably got away with a couple fouls, to be honest. But he gets some respect from the refs, and just the effort, the timing, his ability to affect shots, even though he's only 6'9". He took a corner three. That if he can maybe do one or two of those a game, that's not the worst thing in the world. I thought Taj was surprisingly good and like a pretty important factor in them winning this game.
Yeah, he was actually awesome when he came in. He had 3 blocks or something.
He definitely affected a lot of shots. I don't know how many were actual blocks, but
it's like one of those
blocks too.
Yeah, they're like the weird blocks where it's like a guy is gathering to go for a layup and you kind of hit him low and they count it as a block, which I never know how to feel about that because I'm like, I kind of feel like that's just a steal. So just call it a steal. But they call it a block, whatever. Either way, it doesn't matter. He knocked the ball loose more than once from Giannis, and like in situations where if he doesn't, Giannis probably just scoring, right? So like he was awesome, and I just think like, is it tenable to expect Taj to like play at that level consistently for whatever would be like 15 minutes a game while Mitch Robinson's out and Hartenstein starting and Sims is out? I don't know. Now, when Sims comes back, is Sims going to play ahead of Taj? I think he probably will. And I don't
think he should.
I mean, we'll see. I think it is easy to dismiss the idea of Sims benefiting from playing from the bench because we haven't seen it in like 2 years. He basically just had to play with the starters the entire time for no reason other than Tibbs being reluctant to like start Hartenstein because he has his rotations and they're his rotations. But like, I mean, I still think there's a chance Sims off the bench is completely fine. That being said, like if he's not, I don't think you can just be like, well, Taj has it. Like if you're trying to be serious about like potentially being a competitive team and winning a playoff series and maybe pushing a team in the second round to even get to the conference finals, I don't think that's really tenable, especially given Randall's limitations defensively. So like, I think that is something they need to address. But for now, for the time being, Taj has definitely helped at a critical moment in time. And yeah, like he deserves a ton of credit for that. We've managed to go nearly 40 minutes on this pod without talking about Jalen Brunson.
Ryan Arcidiacono. Oh,
yeah, Ryan Arcidiacono. Actually, he didn't even get a minute in this game because of how lackluster we were to close it in the last 3 or 4 minutes. But Yeah, Jalen Brunson, man, what a performance. Probably, I mean, he's had like a few this year where I'm like, man, that's one of the best performances I've seen from an individual player, especially in the regular season. And honestly, I think he had the best individual performance I've seen personally in the playoffs last year from a Knicks player in that game 6 against Miami that they lost. But yeah, I think this was another masterpiece under his belt. And one thing that was very interesting about their shot chart in this game is I know it sounds ridiculous because they've actually scored pretty okay against the Bucks and gotten pretty good shots against the Bucks. But I think that their flow hasn't been great at times, and it's because of how Milwaukee is defending. And it's not that Milwaukee is particularly great defensively, but they really force you into taking a lot of pull-up jumpers, especially in the mid-range, because of how like not aggressive their drop coverage is, but like how aggressively they play drop in terms of how often and how committed they are to it. Obviously, their size, their length could be a factor as well in that. In terms of deterring us from taking threes, although I personally feel that's like a very small sample size thing that I don't totally buy. Like we can't, like I understand they're a better defensive team probably than the Nets, but like the Nets are a long team, the Lakers are a long team, but we were able to score better against them and create better shots against them. But to bring it back to this, like I just thought Brunson and the team in general understood the game plan very clearly, understood what Milwaukee likes to do defensively and what shots that you can get against them defensively, and they took it. And yeah, sure, Brunson obviously does plenty of very flashy ISO,
That last
ball
fadeaway
movement.
on Dame,
Yeah, that
like
was nuts.
it looked like
That
a
was
wrecked possession. Dame played excellent defense, and he took the shot. I'm like, there's no way this is going in. It was like a Dirk fadeaway from a 6-footer.
yeah, it
And
was
just,
it was a wild shot. But like, don't let the flashy stuff take you. Like, watch the start of that game, and I think Brunson hit like 3 straight middies to start the game. And like it's obvious to me anyway, or I would think it's obvious that he knew, like he was comfortable taking those because he knew like Brooks not coming up here. He's not challenging this. And I'm just gonna walk into these shots and I'm gonna hit them. And like that's the simple stuff that puts doubt in defenses' minds, right? Like, oh, okay, now we have to adjust because Brunson's cooking from this spot. And I just think the way he started that game opened so much up for everybody. And then obviously RJ had a good start. Randall picked it up kind of later in the first quarter and into the second quarter, and then Quickley came in. He was awesome. So like those 4 guys did the bulk of the scoring. I think Josh Hart might have ended up with 10 also, but like those 4 had Brunson had 38. I think Randall had 26.
27.
27. Quick had 20, and I think RJ had 22. I want to say, but I could be wrong on that.
RJ 21. Sorry, Randall 24, RJ 21, Quickley 20 and 22 minutes. So
yeah. So like those guys did the bulk of the scoring, but yeah, I mean Brunson really, I mean that was a special performance, and it was a performance they needed because I think they needed to be on the winning end of a game against one of these Eastern Conference elite teams, right? Like specifically Boston or Milwaukee. And yeah, look, I think they've lost now. They've lost to Boston. Is it 3 times already this season? Yeah, they've lost. No, they lost them opener. They lost them another time in Boston, and they lost them after that in-season tournament loss a 3rd time. And then they've lost to Milwaukee 3 times previously as well. So yeah, like the Knicks really needed to get a win against one of the big boys, and they did, and it was on Christmas Day. It was a national game, and so nobody can try and tell me the Milwaukee wasn't trying to win this game because, man, if they weren't trying to win this game, if I were the refs, I'd been pissed because they did not shut the fuck up complaining about the refs the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the Knicks are playing well, they do get under the skin of other teams. I think you complain the most about the refs when you're getting gypped, but I think it's pretty close when they're like the most frustrated I know when I've been with other players in pickup is like, it's you get more mad when it's like, yeah, like you're just there, you're causing problems, and like that when you're frustrated, you look for anything to latch onto. I think Giannis, they frustrated him. When I've seen teams in the playoffs stop him, that's what it looks like, right? What I was talking about, timing the help well, forcing him to choose between taking jumpers or like that slow motion thing, and you're not biting, in the half court. I thought Brunson was obviously awesome. It's kind of crazy to think he left points on the floor. He had that floater at the end of the first half where it was a baby floater. It's the shot he hits in his sleep, and nobody around him, and he missed that. And I was like, and that's the difference between him and 40 points. I don't know if you can win a championship with your best player not being able to hit a technical free throw. I don't know what's up with that. Has Brunson hit a single technical free throw this year? He missed 2 free throws, and so he'd have had 42 points if he hits those. He was incredible. I will say it's worth noting just the consistency comes from how much he can add, right? I think this is what a lot of people miss, is that because of people are like, you can't rely on the mid-range game. But it's not so much that, because the guy gets the rim. Like, if you give him, he's capable of getting around and finishing at the rim. He's capable of shooting from 3. So defenses will concede those mid-range shots in the modern NBA, but he can hit them, and it puts defenses in really a no-win situation. And but I'm going to go a little bit of the other way. I do think there's a lot of flashy stuff.
Oh no, there was. I wasn't trying to.
Yeah,
I was saying don't let the flashy stuff take away from just how simple, understanding where your bread is buttered and understanding how a defense, what shots they're going to concede to you. All the flashy stuff was awesome, but even with the flashy stuff, right? It's not like most of it was single coverage because they don't want to send help in the mid range. So he understood that, and he was very comfortable operating in there. Not that he's always comfortable operating in the mid range, but this year we've seen him be more aggressive about taking threes and all that kind of stuff. And I think this was kind of not a departure, but it was more like
only took 3 3-pointers this game.
Yeah, it was kind of like a throwback Brunson game where he was like, no, I understand the assignment today.
Yeah. And but I'm gonna go with a comp that is going to probably piss you off, but I mean it in the best way. There are a lot of flashes to me of early career Kyrie Irving. Doesn't have quite the up in the air, finishing at the rim because he's not that kind of vertical athlete. But just the handle, he had a few of those. They were overplaying him to the left side of the screen with his offhand. The in and out moves was leaving people in the dust. By the way, they threw Andre Jackson Jr., who I actually like a lot, on him. He's a physical big dude, 6'6", really hustle guy. I like that he's getting minutes for the Bucks for them. He's the right kind of player you want on that team, on a team that's really built for offense. He gives them a lot. And, Brunson was getting annoyed a couple times because he was playing physical D, right? And I thought it was clean defense. Like I said, sometimes the most frustrating thing cannot be when the other team is actually fouling, but when, they're being effective and you kind of are just hoping for a bailout call. But Brunson kept his composure, kept attacking. Just the bag this guy has, right? The crossovers, the in and outs, the pull-ups. He doesn't let you off at all. And I think, because I was thinking about this, why are people like, yeah, Brunson's good, but why is there always that, right? And I'm like, well, he can't jump out of the gym. That's probably it, right? And from that kind of a guard, that's what you expect. And he doesn't really have the Dame range, right? Although he's been expanding his range, it's not like Dame or Steph where he just pulls up. Dame had one, the Knicks were starting to surge, and he walks into a logo 3. And it's like, yeah, you can say, well, they should have been a little bit more attentive, but that's just there for him, right? I don't know if Brunson has quite that. So it doesn't, he gets penalized, but he just stresses defenses so much. And I know this conversation's been beaten to death, but I want to have, this is not about backlash or, we talked about it, right? Like, the biggest frustration for Knicks fans is, that first, the Becky Hammond segment, really what I think really angered was that the caption was, "Are the Knicks stuck?" Right? And Malika Andrews asked, "Are the Knicks stuck?" And when when that's the whole conversation, they're coming off, they'd lost. This was even before they lost to the Bucks. This was after they had beat the Nets and the Lakers back to back, and pretty convincingly, right? And that's the topic of conversation. It's frustrating because one, they in the last 2 weeks he's been the best player. Even on Saturday, I thought he was the best player on the floor.
Yeah, that's not even really a debate.
Nearly outscored Giannis and Dame by himself. Before that, against the Lakers, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, 2 bona fide elite players, was the best player on the floor. Against Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, he was the best player on the floor. That hasn't been the issue, right? He averaged 30 in the playoffs. The question is, do you need a better player than Brunson to win a championship? Now, if the argument is, well, every team has an MVP, right? I could get behind that, but I think just to say that, oh, the best player is never the smaller guy. Okay, why is that, right? Well, you could say, well, if you don't have wing size, it can be tough to generate efficient offense in the playoffs. No, right? They faced two elite defenses last year. The Knicks had it's not some blow, but for the playoffs, they had a 115 offensive rating with him on the floor. That's pretty solid against those quality of defenses. They fell off they fell off a cliff, by the way, with Brunson off. They went down to an 80 offensive rating in the minutes they didn't play. Part of that Quickley hurt. When Quickley played, he was ineffective on offense for most of the playoffs. Fine, but they had a pretty solid offense with him on the floor. He's putting up the numbers. There haven't been defenses that have really solved him in the playoffs. And then the other part, so then you'd say, all right, so historically, why are those reasons, right? Number one, I would say, why do short guys never end up being the best player? Number one, they get paid like they're the best player. And if the guy you pay like that is a liability on defense or can't add value, it really constrains your ability to build around them, right? You need that guy because Iverson was paid like that, and the strategy for the Sixers was, let's surround them with great defenders. The problem was they're all limited on offense, right? Their second option was Aaron McKee. You see that with a lot of these players. Brunson is not paid like that, right? Brunson is paid $24 million a year. The other small guards, they're all making at least $10 million more than him. So one, that may not apply as much. You have the ability to build around him and then if you want to say, well, the Knicks haven't really been able to do that with the kind of two-way players as much as you'd like, we could talk about that. But clearly the problem isn't that Brunson is the best player, right? He's averaged 36.5 against the Bucks. If they say, well, a taller player would have averaged 40 and that makes the difference, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Number two might be, so I mentioned that, smaller guys don't necessarily get their shots. Oh, and I'll add this, right? The guys that have been successful, Isaiah and Steph, are brilliant shot makers, right? Everyone says Steph is the exception because he's the greatest shooter in history. Look at Brunson is shooting 46% from three. He's is he Steph? No, but he's shooting really well on high volume, right? It hasn't been the hyper athletic guys that have broken the short guy mold. It has been shooters, and he is a shooter. The other part of that I'll mention to the previous point, Steph was the first time they won when Steph was their best player. Steph was on a $11 million a year when he signed after he had the ankle injuries.
11 or 12, yeah, something like that.
So that allowed them to get a guy like Iguodala. They had Draymond, right? So they were able to. So people, I'm not taking away from just how brilliant Steph is, but his contract did allow them to build around him at a time when, especially that part of his career, he hadn't really elevated on defense to the level he has been now. That allowed them to really build around him in a way that mitigates some of those concerns. So to me, it's I would have probably agreed with a lot of what people are saying, but if you look beyond it and just instead of saying it hasn't happened before, say what are the context? What are the reasons for that? Let's dig deep. Do those really apply to Brunson? No. Do I think they need to surround him with good defenders and good two-way players and shooters? Absolutely. But the bigger issues have been they haven't had a consistent second option or a third option in these games, and that's really the biggest issue. And we can talk about that. Do they need another scorer? Absolutely. We've talked about this a lot. Either Randall needs to show that he can consistently be that, or they need to find someone who can be that. But I think that was leaving aside kind of, whatever the disrespect or whatever, I'm not even going to get into that. I'm saying if you actually have a real conversation about whether a small guy can be certainly your top offensive option, but even your best player, you dig deep into the reasons why it hasn't happened historically. And I think Brunson has all of the ability and the context that the Knicks have, they have all of the ability to kind of not have to get an MVP level player and still contend.
Was that a question? Was that a question or just a statement?
That's a statement.
Yeah, I don't really know where I fall on this in the sense I think Brunson can be your best scorer. I still have a little bit of apprehension about can he be your best? Can he be your primary facilitator? Although I'm pretty sure he can. I just think like Tibbs' offenses have consistently ground down into fucking, dust into the playoffs, regardless of who he has at his disposal. So I think some of the issues with like how stagnant and all that stuff it can be is more on.
That's not really a height issue, right? That's more just kind of he's
Yeah,
not.
I mean, I also just think that has more to do with Tibbs' system and coaching style than it has to do with players, which is also why like I'm at a point where I'm like I kind of don't care. Like I care about the very underlying stuff of like, do you pass out of drives? Like that's but like when I look at our low assist rate and I look at guys like, Quickley or Brunson, who for a starting point guard isn't like a high assist guy or whatever, like I just am like, I kind of think a lot of this is just systemic. And I feel like because I watch like plenty of Kings and Malik Monk's having like a great passing season. I don't think Malik Monk is some like amazing passer, but I do think that like the way they play is conducive to guys getting assists. So like it's not surprising to me that he's having a very good assist season. And I think if you put him in New York and you swapped, fucking like Dante DiVincenzo there, he'd probably have a higher assist number than he does now, and Monk would probably be a lot lower. So like that's just, I mean, whatever. That's very far afield from your question. But yeah, I think Brunson can be your number one scorer. I think it's probably possible for him to be your number one offensive player. Do I think he can be your best player? I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I think you need somebody you would like.
You
It's
usually
kind
need
of
an MVP, right?
yeah. Well,
Regardless
it's
of
like
height.
the idea. It's like the idea of like LeBron is the Lakers' 100% unequivocal best offensive player still. I do think Anthony Davis is better than him today, because of what he gives you both.
Well, when
on both
healthy,
ends
he
of
is
the
the
floor.
best defender, right?
Right.
Besides maybe Bam, but I
Yeah.
would take Anthony Davis. I mean, Anthony Davis is a bigger Bam, essentially.
Yeah.
So
So I that's where I kind of land on it. But like I also think there's a world where like maybe you don't. Like maybe your team, we've talked about like if you can get Lauri Markkanen for just like RJ and a couple picks or whatever the hell it is, like is that team a contender? And I think that team would be a contender. And I think Brunson would be the best player on that team. So maybe I don't know, like kind of thinking about this just makes me feel like the way we discuss this stuff and the way, I mean, especially that conversation about Brunson and just the Knicks in general is like really reductive and stupid. Like, oh, are the Suns a contender right now because they have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker? Are they a contender? Like, I don't think so.
well, they're getting
But
Bradley Beal back, so that'll change everything.
yeah, he'll be back forever. But like, I don't know. I just think the way that people talk about this stuff with the NBA is like that. It feels like very much a dated way to talk about it with how talented the league is. I think it's a pretty dated way to talk about it. Like, is OKC a contender right now? I mean, the metrics would say they are. So let's say they are. Like, how many guys in that team are you like, oh, he's a top 10 guy? Top like
One.
Yeah, one. Right?
One, and
like,
they have a guy who can play like well, you got to give Chet Holmgren credit. Like he's really good.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I'm not going to put him in that conversation yet, obviously, because he just has not. I mean, second year in the league, it's whatever it is, 30 games in the season. Like, I'm not denying he has that talent. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Like, I just think how many top 10 players do the Minnesota Timberwolves have? Do they even have one?
No, I mean, is Ant better than Brunson at this moment? Maybe he's a little more playoff proof because he's a better defender when the chips are down, but I don't think he's not offensively. He's not better than Brunson. I don't think.
Yeah,
so. Not right now.
I just, but like either way, I mean, first of all, I don't think Jalen Brunson is a top 10 player, but like, I don't think Ant is either, and I think Minnesota is a contender. And like what I would say about Minnesota is I don't think Anthony Edwards can run your offense, and that's going to be a problem for them in the playoffs because I don't think Mike Conley is good enough, or maybe not necessarily that he's not good enough, but they don't have enough. They don't have another facilitator aside from Mike Conley that I would trust. So like, but like if they got, let's just say they got Reggie Jackson, or like they got, I don't know, Malcolm Brogdon.
Immanuel Quickley.
Yeah, whatever. Let's just say they got Malcolm Brogdon as whatever. I like to make fun of him, but like, I would feel a lot better about their chances. Like then I'd feel a lot better. It's like, okay, now you actually have somebody off the bench who like, yeah, is he the best facilitator? No, but he can come in and he can just like do his thing, run a bunch of pick and rolls, and you're okay for like 5, 6, 7 minutes. Like, and that's what is Malcolm Brogdon? He's like a top 100 player. You know what I mean?
He's
Like,
sixth man of the year.
well, yeah, well that sucked. But like, my point is more like I just think the way we're talking about basketball still is so reductive and stupid because the talent pool is bigger than it's ever been, and I therefore think that like teams like the Knicks or Minnesota or whatever that like maybe you don't view as true contenders. Yeah, I agree with that. The Knicks is currently constructed, especially without Mitchell Robinson, are 100% not true contender. Now, what makes them a true contender? Do they if they don't get a fucking MVP caliber guy, it's impossible? I reject that. I think that there is a path to contention without that. And maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I suspect over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we will see more ensemble casts winning a title. Like shit, I think you could argue 2 years ago Boston almost did it. I think you could say 3 years ago Phoenix almost did it.
Miami went to 6 games last year, right? And
yeah.
I mean, Butler
Five.
has not what?
Five.
They went to 6 against the
Lakers in the bubble. And Bam missed a bunch of that series.
Yeah, and like as good as Jimmy Butler is, I don't necessarily consider him an MVP player, even with playoff Jimmy, right? He didn't. I mean, did the Heat beat the Knicks because Butler was the best player on that floor? I think there are some people who believe that. I actually think he wasn't the best player on the Heat. I think Bam Adebayo is still underrated. I think that you hit it on the, and you've been talking about this for a while. Like the super team thing where you have 2 or 3 stars hasn't really played out. Like Phoenix is just the latest iteration. I think the one that really had a lot of success, the original kind of in the new age, the super team, or let's say Boston started it, right? They had the big 3 in their prime. All 3 played really good defense. I think what made the Heatles work really well, that's the most underrated part of that, aside from having 2 top 5 players in their prime, was, and including, second best player of all time, they all 3 really bought in on defense. They were all extremely impactful defenders. Especially Bosh. Bosh might have been the best of the 3, to be honest. Like, he was a great defender in Miami. And that's what gets talked about so little. So if you want to say Brunson cannot be your, like you can say this, right? Like your best player can't get played off. By the way, that applies to how many times have you seen a team win a championship with a defensive liability as their best defender or as their best player? I'm going to say Dallas. Really, that's it. I mean, can you think of anyone else recently? Steph, I don't think was a liability.
I don't think Steph's a liability. I think if you're like, I've never the Steph thing is a liability. Is stupid because it's like, oh well, he couldn't handle LeBron and ISO. It's like, okay.
Well, that's always the answer. Like, how do you stop Steph? You attack him on defense. If it was that easy, buddy, that would have worked, right? I do. Think
also, like what they give you offensively is the point. It's like, yeah, you can do that, but this guy can get it back on the other end. So,
well, I mean, I do think that I do think if your guy can get played off the floor, or like it's in a situation where like he's so bad on defense that it gives away, like there's a reason why the top wings are also really good defenders, right? Like Paul George is kind of that prototype, even though he's not won anything. I do think like if you're in a situation where Brunson is really getting attacked and is giving away a lot of that's a fair thing to bring up, but that's not usually what gets talked about, right? You're talking about offense with these guys. I don't see what Brunson's weakness is really on offense. You want to say like playmaking, fine. But we're not even at that point of discussion. Like, and this is not to, attack Becky Hammond necessarily. And I get it. It's ESPN. It's going to be a short segment. She doesn't have time to go into like why she might believe it. Totally get that. I think the Kenny Smith comment was way more ridiculous. Like the Paolo Banchero thing is like, are you drunk? Like what the hell is going on? He's not better than Jalen Brunson. He's probably not. I mean, is Banchero better than Julius Randle? I don't think so. It certainly, like, if your argument is Randle was shit in the playoffs, like, well, let's see what Paolo Banchero does in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, we saw Paolo Banchero, and I know FIBA is not the same thing, but he did not cover himself in glory over there.
Yeah, so I think to your point, it's a reductive conversation, and I definitely agree that, like, for a variety of reasons, I think and I think that the Knicks are going to go through this, right? When they have to pay Brunson and Randle, I don't think that's necessarily, like, I think they will eventually have to trade Randle, and this has nothing to do. I think he's played a lot better. It's not something like they need to do it to contend this year, but I don't think they'll be able to pay both of them and like build a really good roster around them. But here's the thing: do you believe the Knicks could win a title if they trade for Lowry Markkanen?
Yeah, I do.
And would he be the Knicks' best player?
No.
I mean, that kind of says it all right there, right?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is I just think like
I think
the best way to
be a contender with OG. I know you don't agree with that, but
yeah.
I am pretty in on this. Like Brunson can be your top offensive guy. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just think that like the league, like I would probably guess that the top 40, 35, 40 guys in the league today are better than the top 35, 40 have ever been in the league before. And therefore, I think like this idea you need to have an MVP caliber guy or a top 10 guy or top 5 is misguided if you have 3 guys that are like top 25-ish. And like
and none of your guys can be liability. Like you said this with Pritchard and the Celtics, right? If Pritchard's your worst defender, you're in a pretty good spot. Like that's where, the Knicks would like to be, besides like Brunson, I think, right? So
yeah, I just think that like I don't know, I think Brunson's pretty easily. He's definitely a top 25 guy to me. I think Randall, it's all about the playoffs, right? If the guy that he is in the regular season shows up in the playoffs or is like 80 to 85% of that guy, he's right there on the cusp of top 25. And then Markkanen, obviously, we have no idea what he's going to do in the playoffs. But like, I think as a regular season player, he's a top 25 guy. So, I mean, I don't really see the reason why that, like, you could tell me they're still a dark horse relative to Milwaukee or Boston. I'd agree with that. But like, I personally think, again, this is just all under this weird, like, we're in this weird hypothetical where it's like, take out RJ, put in Markkanen or whatever. And also like where Randall doesn't play like a bum in the playoffs. Like we don't know the answer to these questions. But if if you get Markkanen and he's what he was in Utah, but for you, and if you get Randall to show up in the playoffs, like, yeah, I think that team's a contender. I don't even think that's very controversial. Like, why would they not be a contender?
Yeah, I mean, if they have to really kill all their depth for Markkanen, like if they give up Quickley, Grimes, and RJ or something like that, that becomes tough. But I mean, and I'll add on the super team point, right? I don't think Milwaukee is the best team in the East. I actually still, I still think it's Boston. Even though the fact that, Giannis is better than Tatum, Dame is a lot better than whoever you consider the number 2. I think team construction matters, right? Like building a more and how the players fit together. Now, Giannis and Dame are a perfect fit, but around them, they are going to guys like Andre Jackson because they just don't have the defenders. I mean, the Knicks killed them in points in the paint. That felt pretty sustainable. It wasn't like the Knicks were hitting a ton of ridiculous shots. And so I think that it's diminishing returns to that concept where you have to make a move for a star. And like I'll say this, like going back to Brunson, like, how do you define a star? You mentioned this with RJ, right? It helps for him to. We always say that at the beginning of games. Randall hits a 3, RJ hits a 3. It's nice to see it. It's nice to see him make one, right? That'll get him going, and we see that, right? And if they miss their first couple, we're like, oh, here goes. It's not that they haven't bounced back. With Brunson, it's never like that. With Dame, it's not like that, right? Dame started off, I think, like 0 for 5 or something, and you never felt like, oh, Dame's just not going to have a good game tonight. It was like, no, it's just a matter of time. Brunson is a matter of time player. I think that's a good definition for a star. You just know at some point this guy, if he's missing shots, he's missing shots. But there isn't a way to stop him, and he doesn't need to get going early to feel like he's going to have a good night. And I think he's just been awesome. And I think what I particularly like about the Lowry fit is he complements the other, like, who would be the number 2 option? Some nights it'd be Randall. And, for me, like if they got Lowry, right, I think one thing you've mentioned in the past is that Randall, will he accept being a third option if they get another guy, right? Like, can he downshift? I don't think he would have to necessarily with Lowry, right? Because it's almost like in The Sopranos where Tony gives Uncle Junior, like he says, you're the boss, right? wink, wink, right? On the side, Tony's kind of doing a lot more of the stuff, right? I think if they got Lowry, they would be like, yeah, Randall, you're the second option, wink, wink. But behind the scenes and behind the arc and all of this stuff that Lowry can do, that doesn't necessarily require him. He's like kind of the perfect guy to avoid some of those problems you brought up, right? If they got a guy like Bradley Beal, or if they got a guy like, even Booker's that great, so that I wouldn't have any qualms about that. But if they got like another high Donovan Mitchell, right? You do have to worry about Randall kind of being willing to downshift. Those worries aren't there as much with Lowry, right? Because you can get Lowry's 20, 22 points in a way that accentuates the team without having to say, Randall, you need to sacrifice your touches.
I mean, getting Randall to sacrifice touches seems like a very difficult problem. You can see it. You saw it in the fucking Milwaukee game. He came in and there was like this sequence where he decided like Quickley's rolling and it's just like, oh no, I gotta get.
But the presence of a guy like Lowry, I think, eases that, or it kind of will create a better context for that. You know what I mean?
Maybe, but the main concern to me is that he looks at Lowry and he's like, well, I'm still better than this guy. Like I think Brunson. I know Brunson hasn't made an All NBA team or an All Star team, but I think there's a different cachet there. Also, let's be quite honest. Brunson obviously had the backing of the entire organization. That's just a very different thing. But I always worry with him where it's like if you get, I mean, I still think it's worth doing, and obviously like you shouldn't not acquire a player that improves you because you're worried that like Randall might not defer to him. Like if that's the case, then maybe that's a Randall problem. But like I do think that there would at least be kind of an adjustment period for sure. And we know this, like we know from the Kemba experience that if you bring somebody in that's supposed to like make life easier for Julius and somebody who he has to make, I don't want to say defer to, but like play off of a little bit more than he plays off of, say, RJ, because he usually makes RJ play off of him. Like that guy better deliver.
Yeah, I mean, if Randall doesn't play well in the playoffs,
then it doesn't matter. Then none of this matters. If Randall doesn't play well in the playoffs, then it doesn't matter. And I honestly, that's the one argument that I actually do think holds some weight in terms of like
the Knicks,
not just the Knicks, but like why would you not? Oh, like let's say you can get Lowry for 3 first-round picks. Why would you not do that? And it's like, well, what if Randall sucks again in the playoffs, and then now we don't have our best picks to trade.
And well, you could still, I mean, you can trade him if Quickley struggles again in the playoffs and you extend him. Like, I don't think Randall would not have trade value even if he's stuck in the playoffs again.
Right, but does he have the trade value you need to get the type of guy that you need? You know, that's
but if you have Brunson and Lowry,
but
if you have Brunson and Lowry, you can trade Randall for a pick or two. You can, if you need to trade Quickley, you can trade Quickley, or if Quickley is resurged, maybe he becomes that guy. But you know, you still would be able to like shape out the roster. You just wouldn't be able to. You've now closed the avenue to getting MVP type player or like a star, right?
Yes, correct.
So or another star, I should say. I do think that's fair. I also don't know if they have Brunson and Lowry, a healthy Mitch or healthy center. You still have a guy like Josh Hart. You know, if they keep Quickley, you know, you have another two-way player there. I don't know. I think maybe even Brunson and Lowry, if you can get just guys around, you know, if you can get, then maybe you trade Randall to get a guy like OG, right? Or someone like that. Because I do think like offense really isn't the issue for this team when Brunson's on the floor, like even in the playoffs. I actually honestly believe that. They had a 115 offensive rating. That I think is, I don't know what the playoff offensive ratings for teams that won it is, but much higher than that against playoff top defenses is going to be tough to put together. And so like, and here's the thing, right? If you really think that, you know, without getting an MVP player, the Knicks are fucked and Brunson's never going to be that, then logically, then you should just say trade Brunson and tank, right? Because isn't that the logical, like from the Knicks are stuck. They need to get that next tier of star, an MVP level player, and they can't. And teams aren't trading those for what the Knicks have. Wouldn't the logical, maybe you can say, well, now you should trade Randall for picks, be patient, while, by the way, Brunson's contract starts to get to the end, and he might not love just taking a step back and trading away his number 2 option. And then say, like, that's one path, but that's also doesn't seem very reasonable. Then the logical follow up is, okay, Brunson's not that guy. Trade everyone and tank, right? So you can get that star. I don't think the Knicks are going to do that. If this is your way of rehashing, like, oh, they should have tanked a couple years ago. Well, they did. They tanked and they got the third pick in the draft, and he's been. I think he's been good for them overall. Isn't that MVP level player? I think even the most hardcore RJ stands wouldn't disagree with that. They did it a couple years ago, and they got a really great player as well, and they got an all-star in KP. That's no surefire way. So like, I think that, yeah, like at this point, if you believe at all in Brunson, if you don't believe in Brunson, then tear it down. If you do believe at all in Brunson, it's going to be that kind of a move. And then if Randall doesn't pan out, then you're going to have to continue to find a way to move him and to add guys around, Brunson and potentially Lowry that can move the needle. The next, I do want to talk about this. I know this is one of your favorite players in the NBA and a guy you really want to go after. The Knicks were rumored to have interest in DeJounte Murray. What are your thoughts on that?
That he's not good, that he's not anything at all what we need. Like, why? It makes no sense.
So to play devil's advocate here, I'm not. This is not the move I would want the Knicks to make necessarily. He is shooting 38% from three this year on 6 attempts per game.
Don't care.
He gives you the ability. If they do have to trade RJ Barrett, he gives you a little bit, that rim pressure. He was a very impactful player in San Antonio his last year. And he gives you, if you're not going to start Grimes, he gives you a solid point of attack defender.
Does he?
And he might be cheap, right? I mean, is there a cost at which, if it's just RJ and a protected pick, and a protected pick, you're not doing? Wow.
No, not interested in DeJounte Murray on this team. I have zero interest in him. I have no interest in his personality. I have no interest in him as a player. I have no interest in dealing with clutch and having to hear about how Rich Paul's fucking butt hurt because Leon Rose didn't kiss his ass. No, I have no interest in DeJounte Murray. I never have. I've never wanted the Knicks to acquire him. I didn't want them to acquire him 2 years ago when they definitely could have. I don't want them to acquire him now. I don't have any idea what he does for this team.
I mean, do you think under Tibbs maybe the defensive kind of prowess comes back?
No. I don't think he was ever that good of a defender.
Not even San Antonio.
No. I thought that was the stupidest. He got all defense for 22 minutes a fucking night. Yeah, really. He plays for any other team in the NBA at that time. Nobody's even talking about that fucking guy. He's the fakest.
You're saying it's a small market bias?
I'm just saying no. It's a Spurs bias. It's this is like how all their young players right now magically end up. Oh, Devin Vassell's so talented. Yeah, they have 6. Congrats, you have 4 wins compared to Detroit's 2. Congratulations. To me, DeJounte's a guy who, if you suck, he can San Antonio traded him, right? What happened to San Antonio when they traded him? They were absolutely terrible. What did they end up winning last year? 17 games or something, whatever it was. What were they the year before with DeJounte Murray? They were 39 wins, something like that. They're a playing team. He is good enough to take some decent collection of role-playing type talent, and if he's the primary guy that's going to get a bunch of usage, yeah, you might be able to get to a play-in level.
There were 34 wins his last
season. Okay, so that's even okay. There we go. So you might be able to get to that level, but does he actually play well off of guys that are better than him, that command more usage than him, that are higher up in the totem pole than him? I don't think so, so why would I want him? He does nothing to me to elevate Brunson. He does nothing to me to elevate Julius Randle. If we kept RJ Barrett in this scenario, he would do nothing to me to elevate him or compliment him or whatever. However you want to pray.
You don't think he could cover for the defensive shortcomings?
He can't cover. They can't even make the fucking Hawks better on defense. They sucked on defense before he got there. They're still fucking awful. At some point, I don't know. I just think maybe he's not that impactful. It's okay. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. No. But why would I want to trade for him? We can just play Immanuel Quickley more. I just don't understand what the logic is. Oh, because DeJounte Murray's 2 inches taller and has a wingspan and sometimes does cool stuff in ISO defense. I should all of a sudden now value him more. But for some reason, For some reason, the Knicks have every year been better than DeJounte Murray's teams have basically for like the last 3 or 4 years. Like I'm not saying all this is down to DeJounte. It's not like, oh, DeJounte Murray's the reason why his teams are what they are, but like he's not elevating them. So why the fuck would he elevate us? I don't. And his skill set isn't even a great compliment. Like I know he's shooting 38% from three. I'm sorry, I'm gonna bet on the career sample at this point. It's large enough. And yeah, I mean he's at 37.4 right now for the year. So like his career is 34.1. I would if I had to bet, I would bet that he finishes closer to 34 than he does to 40.
Yeah, I think that's a fair bet. Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that, I do think Brunson's a much better off-ball player than Trae Young. I'm not sure I want to take the ball out of Brunson's hand. I think ideally if you got a great facilitator next to him, and I do think, if you get a great facilitator next to him, it could elevate him a little bit in some ways, allowing him to focus a little bit more on scoring. I don't know that Murray's that guy. I know he averaged, 9-10 assists in San Antonio. It hasn't necessarily translated to the Hawks. And while I do think Brunson is a better off-ball player than Trae, that is another small guard. It hasn't worked, right? Another guy who likes to score with Murray next to him.
We don't need to be taking like hypothetical bets on players in trade. Like the Knicks are good enough where we don't need to do that. We don't need to operate.
And Markkanen in comparison, who will be a lot more expensive. I do bring that up because it's an important factor. You wouldn't be betting the farm on Murray. I think, like, if it's just RJ and a protected, right? It probably won't be that. So this is probably a non-starter. But our Markkanen is a lot less of a hypothetical fit on the Knicks, right? He's played the three before in Cleveland, been very successful next to a ball-dominant guard in Garland. He's played, he's playing really well in Utah as the number one option. They're really a lot worse without him on the floor. So I definitely think it's a lot less hypothetical. But I think the advantage of Murray is you wouldn't have to really, if it works out the right way, you wouldn't have to bet the farm. Another MVP player who might be available at some point going forward, what is happening in Phoenix, they're obviously not meeting expectations at this point. Durant expressed frustration. Do you think Booker is a guy who the Knicks might be able to target, even if not this season, maybe in the offseason? And is it worth maybe holding your chips for that move?
I don't think he'll be available this offseason. He's got like 5 years left under contract. So even if he wants out, Phoenix can just be like, no, we're not going to do it. And I just think at some point, like, yeah, you can, there's always, like, it's funny because I've advocated, like, you shouldn't just make a trade because this guy's available now. Usually somebody else comes available. But, like, this team's actually good. So, like, they're at a point where if a guy becomes available who genuinely you feel makes you a contender, then you should be willing to do it. Like, if I didn't think Markkanen made us a contender, I'd be like, yeah, no, move on. Like, but I do. And so therefore I would. Like, if you know for sure Booker is going to be available and you believe he's going to make you a contender, then sure, wait, fine. I'm fine with that. But, like, you better know, and you better have a pretty good idea that you're going to get it done if you're passing on opportunities that then get cashed in by somebody else. Like if OKC decides, hey, you know what, let's get Lauri Markkanen, and they do it. So that's what I'd say. I just think, like, you can't pass on opportunities now for something down the line that maybe might one day happen. Especially if the opportunity you're talking about is one that makes you a contender.
So going back to Booker is 27. If it doesn't work out for the Suns with the KD Beal experiment, he's 27 now. He has a 5-year extension kicking in that starts next year. To your point. But the Suns, now they don't have, they've traded a lot of picks. They could probably get value for KD, but it'll be basically going backwards, right? Going back to, they probably wouldn't get Mikal Bridges or Cam Johnson and those kind of guys. At this point, by the time they're ready to contend, even if they kind of restock some of their picks, Booker will be 31, 32 maybe. and may at that point even say that, okay, this time I want to go somewhere else, right? Or a couple of years he might demand a trade. If the Suns really want to decide that it's not working and pull the plug and do a full rebuild, does that put him into play more?
Maybe. I just don't see why they would do it. I have a hard time believing a new
because
owner.
They're not going to be good for
but
a few
a
years.
new owner came in and traded everything for Kevin Durant. He's not punting on that after one season. And he'll probably look at this and be like, oh, well, Beal missed time and this guy sucked and that guy sucked. We'll figure it out this summer and that's that. Like, I just don't think Beal's getting traded this summer. And I think people are being delusional about this. Like, what player gets traded with 5 years left on their contract? Has any player ever gotten traded with 5 years left on their contract? Ever?
Well, Mitchell got traded with 3 left, right? And
that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're anticipating that coming down the line.
Yeah, but even if you're anticipating that, you'll be like, okay, well, I can wait like a couple years. I'll still get a fucking haul.
If Booker was available, is there anything off the table for you to trade for him?
Like individually, or
is there a guy you're like, in no circumstance am I trading this guy besides Brunson?
No, under no circumstance, no.
So you trade Quickley in a Booker deal?
Yeah, if it was like, oh, we'll give you Booker for Quickley and Fournier and whatever other fucking matching contract, like Quickley and RJ and Fournier for Booker, I'd be like,
and $1 million picks.
Yeah, I mean, well, but that's the point. Then no, I'm not going to do it. I'm saying, but there's no individual.
So like, how much? So you'd have to reduce like the unprotected pick package for Booker to include Quickley, like substantially for you.
Yes. I just don't. I don't. But I don't even think that's like he's not getting traded. I don't. Like, I think it's crazy that people are actually like he can go up there and cry and demand a trade, and they're gonna laugh in his face. They'll be like, "That's great, dude. You signed a 5-year extension. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. It's your problem."
Yeah.
Like what's he gonna do? Not try for the next 5 years? It's not realistic.
People have done that.
Zion,
Albert Hainsworth.
Yeah.
Oh, is that a good comp for Zion? Albert Hainsworth.
Maybe.
Which one's heavier? Yeah. So I mean, I think that it seems unlikely that Booker will get traded, and like and the other thing I'll add. So I don't think it'll happen this season. I know you said that there's a good chance, if the Cavs continue to, they're picking it up a little bit, but if the Cavs flounder, maybe they're 6th seed or even a play-in team. Do you think do you think he gets traded this offseason? And do you think it's worth the Knicks trying to get him?
I think he will get traded this offseason. I probably would not trade for him.
Even what if it's like Grimes, RJ, and like a couple of picks?
Probably not.
Is it just the small backcourt, or you're adding not a?
I just don't really get what like. Okay, so now we have one wing on the roster, and
the Knicks probably would have a
Josh Hart, who's like 6. Okay, so now we're depending on rookie. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, okay, so now we're depending on rookies to come into a playoff rotation and like address not just like, hey, we need you to buy us 5 minutes here and there off the bench. No. Hey, we need you to be a quality wing defender in playoff series. Like, that's just not realistic.
Well, I mean, other teams have. I mean, it's been probably a little bit repeated ad nauseum. It's worth noting the Heat are worse in his minutes, but Heat got a guy in Jaime Jaquez, right, who's providing some level of that impact, right? I don't think he's as good of a defender yet. I think he will be. He's very talented. But also what I'll add to that is if you really think of Quickley's impact as that good and you get to hold on to him in this deal, which I assume you would prefer to do than keep a true wing. Grimes isn't really a true wing, but if you keep a guy like Grimes with more size, maybe he can cover for some of those kind of.
He's not going to be on the floor to close games, though. Like your close Brunson,
unless you double down on kind of a 3-guard lineup.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Like, and honestly, the Knicks 3-guard lineups here haven't been particularly that good with Brunson, DiVincenzo, Quickley. They haven't played a lot of minutes.
Mitchell isn't DiVincenzo, but
yeah, but like, I mean, yeah, you're right. That might not be a good thing.
But he's bigger, he's stronger.
DiVincenzo's a better rebounder, he's a better defensive player.
Mitchell gives you a lot more creation, right?
Of course, but like, I mean, only one guy's gonna have the ball in their hands at a time. So like, a lot of his utility.
Brunson's a good off-ball player though, and so is Quickley.
Yeah, but you need to be like these guys have to provide. Like, so now we're taking the ball out of their hands to give it to Mitchell. Like, this is just like this makes
Well,
no
to
sense to me.
amplify Mitchell to that, like all three of them are
Now
pretty
we're
fucking.
amplifying Donovan Mitchell, who can't
Well, they would amplify each other, right?
hasn't
Because
played
all
a
three of them
fucking
are
good playoff
really
series
great.
since the fucking bubble.
So that's a fair point. But I'm saying that I do think like like if you don't think that Mitchell and Brunson would make each other better,
I
and
didn't want to
quickly,
trade for him. I didn't want to trade for him in the first place.
but if the cost is lower, that the cost was like what it would have been like Mitch, RJ, and
Whatever it
Quickly, I
was,
think, and 3 firsts. Like that obviously was a non-starter. But we know a little bit more about Grimes now and some of his limitations.
Do
We know that
so you want to go to battle against fucking Boston and Milwaukee with Brunson, Mitchell, pick a three, Randall, Mitch? I'm sorry, I'm just out on that. Like I'm not doing that. Just we're gonna get destroyed. That's a joke. Like
I think earlier this year you had said that that would be kind of the move you saw them making,
yeah,
and
I
it
could
seemed
see
like you had
them making
accepted
it.
that. But you don't think there's any world in which you'd be like enthusiastic.
I just think
about
they shouldn't do it. No, I just think they shouldn't do it unless it's like literally like, hey, we'll trade you Mitchell for RJ straight up. Like I'm just not really that interested in it, and it's not because Donovan Mitchell's not a good player. I just don't really get like the point of making these moves is to like make us a contender. Like that doesn't really that to me that's like a version of the Hawks, a better version of the Hawks doing the DeJounte Murray trade, where it's like yeah,
Wow.
it's a
I would say
good,
it's more like the Cavs doing the same thing, but
sure. I mean that's the point. It didn't make them a contender either, but like hey, they won the fucking Labor Day press conference, so good for them.
I did want to ask. So moving away from the star trades, I did want to ask. So you mentioned yourself Gibson as the backup is probably not sustainable for 15 minutes a night. Certainly giving you what he gave you against Milwaukee. That's not a knock on Taj Gibson. That's father time being undefeated. That's all of these things. And we've seen when Hartenstein gets into, even against Milwaukee, got into foul trouble. They were on a razor's edge and they asked Taj to do things they probably shouldn't have to ask him to do every night. You've mentioned Olynyk before. I don't know that he's going to be particularly available. Andre Drummond had like a fantastic game. If he's your backup,
he's not going to be available.
Do you see the Knicks making? I mean, is that the move you see the Knicks making, like a center who can fill in? Or I mean, you said you might believe in Jericho a little bit more. Even
Yeah, I mean, I think if they make a move, that would be the move. But it's possible Jericho comes in and does a decent job as a backup, and they're like, you know what, none of this shit's worth it, and it doesn't make us any materially better, so let's pass. Especially because Mitch is going to be back next year. So that would be my guess. The only thing I would say is if they feel like they can't keep Hartenstein and they want to go and jump the market and try to bring somebody in that's under contract past this season to back him up for now and then be the backup behind Mitch next year, I could see that. But who that is, I don't know. Like, I don't think you're going to do that with Clint Capella. I don't think you're going to do that with whoever. Pick a center. Like,
I think
it's just
Congo extended too, right? That was a good
yeah. And I don't know. I just don't see that being out there. But it's the thing I could see them doing. Who that is, I don't know.
I mean, is Zach Collins like available? That kind of guy, maybe.
I would definitely rather not sign Zach Collins.
Well, I mean, if he's in the backup role, right? He gives you that kind of stretch component as well, a little bit. I think that if they want to contend this year, do you think that if they did make a market trade, is there a way to get Olynyk back, or do you think that that's just going to be they're just going to have to give up too much at that point?
No, I think they could probably throw in a few seconds for him. I don't think Olynyk's going to cost you very much.
So do you think they can just do that move in a vacuum then, even if they don't get Lowry?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine there's competition. He's a good player.
He's 32 years old. I don't think the teams that you would need to beat out to get him are going to you could probably beat out any of their offers if you wanted to. So, yeah.
So Lowry and Olynyk would be kind of your guys that you're looking for the Knicks to trade for.
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty good move in season. I'd be fine with that. Sense. All right. I think that's a good place to end it. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you. Plug anything you'd like to plug.
Find me at Stacy Patton 89. I will plug something we are planning to do, just a preview. But for those of you who are college football fans, we're going to be partnering with Strictly NFL to do a crossover pod on the college football playoff. So I would encourage you to check that out.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that, as I am also looking forward to the college football playoff, in which Ohio State is not playing, but Michigan is. Aside from that, I have nothing to plug, so I'll plug all the wonderful work with Strickland. Check out the recaps that everybody's doing. Matt Miranda did another great one for the Christmas Day victory over the Bucks. Check that out. Gigi just dropped something on who the Liberty should draw or should look at drafting in the WNBA draft, so definitely worth your time. Aside from that, I have nothing, so I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their holidays. I hope everybody had a great Christmas, and thank you to Bet Online, our wonderful sponsor. And I will see you on Friday.